So the first quarter financial report covers our first 3 months of the fiscal year through October 1 through December 31st of last year. All figures that will be presented today are unaudited, but they're pretty accurate, having been developed by and reviewed by our Chief Financial Officer, our Finance Director, and our Budget Officer as well. The financial policies that City Council approves annually, as well as the City Charter, require the City Manager to provide quarterly updates to the City Council, and so this will be the first one for this fiscal year. This is a briefing you will receive, as you customarily do, later today, a pretty in-depth report of the finances. The city does a great job in producing these reports. It looks like it's at least 100 pages, so that'll be emailed to you later this afternoon. So let's begin with the general fund revenues specifically. In our general fund, this year's budget includes an adopted amount of $286 million in all our revenues. When we look at the projection for what we anticipated to collect for just the first quarter, that would total a little over $105 million. With our actuals collected through that 3-month period coming in at $111 million, that puts us over the estimated amount by about $5.5 million, which is a good thing. Now, of that $5.5 million, 2.4, about half or so, is from property tax, and that's not that we're going to collect more property tax, it's just received a little sooner than what we had anticipated. And so as the months go by in the fiscal year, we'll begin to catch up in total, and we should collect what we estimated, around that $94 million. So the difference then of 3.1 in extra revenue comes from sales tax, just under $1 million more in sales tax, $900,000, as you can see in the graph. We received more industrial development agreement payments than planned by $1.4 million. And then the third item that helps us to get to that $3.1 million is about $800,000 in better than projected EMS transport and service fees from our fire department. So in total then, 5.5 better in revenues with about 2.4 really an earlier collection of some of our property taxes. Let's look at the general fund expenditures on the next chart. And so our general fund budget that includes carryover budgets, there's certain encumbrances that go all the way up to September 31st, and those get carried forward into the fiscal year if the City Council approves. So when you add the $8.5 million and carry forward with the original budget, our budget's $307.8 million. When we look at the first quarter budget, what we think we would spend in those first 3 months, that's a little over $76 million. And then our actuals for the first quarter come in just under $60 million, which is about $17 million less than what we had planned or projected. And that is somewhat in line with the past 3 years. We're anywhere from 19 to 22% under the spent amount where we think to be. Ideally, we want to be closer to that 19 or even 18% amount, because that means we're putting monies into production. That variance, so some of that is explained by some of the carryovers, the rollovers, including some dollars for the Ocean Drive project, which is still underway, and some dollars in our solid waste operations that are longer lead, and so it's taking a little longer to spend through those, including some of the work that's being done for the design and engineering for some of the projects at our landfill, as well as our refuse carts that were ordered, but because of supply chain issues, are taking a little longer to come in. So as we know in our budget, we have our baseline services, but each year City Council, based on community input and the council's input, we improve our budget and provide additional services to the community. And so in this budget that City Council approved last year, there were 68 budget initiatives totaling $14.3 million. Those include things like 10 additional sworn police officer positions that Mayor Guajardo and the council were very supportive of having in the budget. The good news is that they are being trained now, and the rest will be trained in July. Those initiatives include 33 fire cadets who started their training in January. Chief Rocha and I were there for their first day. It includes things like 3 replacement medic units in our EMS fleet, a litter crew for downtown and other corridor collections. You might notice it's a lot cleaner by Stripes and City Hall because of that litter crew, and then numerous park improvements across our city. So of those 68 initiatives, 57 are either on schedule or ahead of schedule. The vast majority. 11 are slightly behind schedule. Some of those are positions that are a little more challenging to fill, like a landscape architect and a veterinarian, and some longer lead things to include the Mirador lighting along the seawall. The important thing, though, is that we meet monthly with all the directors to make sure their plans that they've established in September are on schedule, and if they're not, we're developing corrective action plans. And so these 11 that are slightly behind will be caught up before we conclude the year. We will be providing you next week a more detailed report on all of these initiatives. You may recall that we have a little booklet that we handed out earlier in the fiscal year, and we'll be providing you that next week, as well as an update, a little bit more detail. So that is the general fund. Let's look at some of our other major funds, including our hotel occupancy tax. This one has a $16.4 million budget, the amount of tax that we expect to collect in the fiscal year. For our first quarter, when you break it out just for the first quarter, about $3.1 million is the estimated amount. You can see that we actually collected 3.8, which is over 700,000 better, which is nearly 20% better. And so October, November, and December revenues for each of those 3 months was above the budgeted amounts. I recently talked to Brett Otting, our CVB director, and he said that for the first quarter, Corpus Christi hotels were 30% ahead of that same time period a year ago, due to higher hotel room rates and a 16% increase in the rooms sold. So hoteliers were bringing in 30% more money than they did a year ago, that same time period, which is great. And Brett said that we're on track to have one of the strongest the strongest collection year this year in terms of hotel tax. Okay, let's look at our water fund and our wastewater fund, two of our big enterprise funds. So in the water fund, the annual revenue budget, $138.6 million. The first quarter projection is about $35.5 million. We actually came in right at $35.5 million, so good there, no surprises. On the expenditure side, the $150 million budget, the first quarter is about $41 million. We came in less than that at about $28.5 million. And that's due to some of the longer lead items that are taking a little bit longer than anticipated. However, in talking with Mike Murphy to prepare for today, when we look through January, when we look at 4 months, we're much more on track. And so some of those items that took a little bit longer through January have been completed and the dollars have been spent. When we look at the wastewater fund, $83 million annual budget on our next slide. The first quarter projection is about 18.5. The first quarter actual is 20 million. That variance of 1.7 million is largely from a litigation settlement check that we received.
Can they change the slide?
We're going to advance that next slide.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
And so that $1.7 million variance is explained by a $1.6 million litigation settlement from the Broadway treatment plant. And Miles will be talking to us about that in the coming council meetings. On the expenditures, similar to the water side, a little bit less spent than what we anticipated for that quarter period, about an $11 million variance in the underspent category. But also with water through January, when we look at that 4-month period, we're much more caught up, indicating that some of those longer lead items took a little bit longer than anticipated. Okay, one thing I want to highlight next, we know that we have a very complex capital improvement program, and that is detailed in this report that'll be sent to you. But if we look at just the bond program, just the 2020 bond program that voters approved about 14 months ago in November, we have a great news story, which is that all the projects, all 42 projects that are in that bond program that the voters approved, are currently either in design or under construction.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. That's, I think, a first, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And 25 of those projects, 25 of the 42 will be under construction by this November. which is another great story. That's more than half of the projects will be under construction by this November. Of that amount, of the 25, 7 of those are significant street reconstruction projects throughout the city. I'm going to read off that list to you. One is in City Council District 1, we have Frontier from McKinsey to Rockwood. In District 1, Hearn, Calicote to Dead End. Also in District 1, Wildcat, FM 624 to Teague. So those will be under construction by November. In City Council District 2 and City Council District 4, Everhart, this is a massive project from SPID all the way to Alameda. It's going to be done in phases, but a tremendous project. It's under design, and we expect it to be under construction in November. In City Council District 3, Flato, Bates to Bear will be under construction. In City Council District 4, Waldron, SBID to Purdue will be under construction. So 7 of those street projects will be under construction by November. A large part of this is because of you, the City Council. Councilman, we have some in District 5, don't worry.
No,
We're going to talk about the design of the swimming pool.
continue on.
Yes,
Keep
sir.
going.
Right. So a big part of this has to do with the City Council approved policy of using a mass selection process. This is a first for our city, and so back in March of 2021, this was just 5 months after the election, City Council approved what we call a design services mass selection process. That means that for all the street projects, all 22, after staff recommendation was given through a review process, 9 local engineering consultants were selected to complete those 22 projects in design, rather than coming month after month or year after year. We had all of those street projects in design by September, which is 5 months ahead of schedule than what we had thought, September 2021. Okay, now we're going to turn the slide here to one more good news story, which is on our work plan. We had talked to the council about this when we went through the budget process. We had said that we have to improve our process in closing out old projects and old bond programs, and we had that in our work plan that spanned through this fall and winter. We're going to have more information for you on February 22nd, a great news story, which is 2 weeks from now. But our staff, led by Constance, our CFO, Heather, our finance director, Eddie, and Camille in the budget office, they went back 14 years worth of accounts, and including all the way back to 2008, looking at projects that had been completed but not closed out, bond programs that had been by and large completed but not closed out. It's hundreds of accounts. One of the staff members says probably thousands. It sounds like a huge number, so I stuck with that 100. But we've reconciled those. We've closed those out. There's going to be some significant dollars to be reprogrammed by this city council. The staff is going to recommend what we hear most, which is dollars for residential street reconstruction in each of the 5 city council districts. It's going to be it's millions of dollars, so we want to keep some suspense here. I don't want to tell you too much, so we'll get people to tune in. But it's good news, so good work done by our finance team, and even better story for the community, because we'll be putting that money into production to better our streets. Okay, so summary for the first quarter then is our general fund revenues are better than projected, which is good. Our HUT revenues are also higher than projected. Water and wastewater revenues are pretty much on budget. One of them came in better, but that's because of a settlement check, and our expenditures are within line. And then, as we mentioned, more than half of the 2020 bond projects will be under construction by November of this year. So great news story, good report.